chairperson of the DA Federal, Dr. Ivan Meyer, has called for a shift in South Africa's approach to empowerment policy. Now, he argues that it's now 31 years since the dawn of democracy and the country cannot continue with the black economic empowerment policy. Now, Dr. Meyer maintains that BEE is no longer aligned with the constitution and lacks sustainability as long as the long-term, in fact, as a long-term strategy to address issues around inequality. And with the DA now part of the government of national unity, he believes that the party has the opportunity to push for the scrapping of BEE in favor of effective poverty alleviation measures.
We cannot simply have an ideological debate for the last 30 years about BEE. The universal consensus in South Africa is that we must have practical or pragmatic proposals. And today we have tabled pragmatic proposals to build an inclusive economy not based on race. And so for us, we fully understand Section 217 of the Constitution, which Mathew Cuthbert has eloquently read, and I want to consult the Constitution again. It says, when an organ of state in a national, provincial or local sphere of government or any other institution identified in national legislation contracts for goods and services, it must do so in accordance with a system that is equitable, that is transparent, that is competitive, and that is cost-effective. Our proposals are in line with the provisions of the Constitution. BEE is not in line with the provisions of the Constitution in terms of the provisions of Section 217 of the Constitution. And that's why the Western Cape government, a DA-led government, has taken the Public Procurement Act to the Constitutional Court. I have received confirmation that the Constitutional Court has received our application. Our affidavit has been sent to the relevant people, and they are having time until the 27th of November to reply to that affidavit. As a DA government, we are looking forward to challenge the Public Procurement Act next year in 2026.
All right, we stay with this particular story now and speak to the DA's head of policy, Mathew Cuthbert. Matt, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. So, as a party, you're saying that the bill will repeal all race-based preferential procurement provisions and also create a public procurement system that encourages genuine economic empowerment. Now, we know that behind every policy, there are individuals who must implement this. And we saw what the SIU said, for example, about the situation in Tembisa, and saying that some officials, some low-ranking officials, are in fact the problem here, enabling what we are now seeing as a flouting of processes. How do you plan to address this?
Thank you so much, Mongiwe, and good evening to your viewers. I think that you make a good point in the involvement of low-ranking officials and corruption that has taken place through the procurement system. But fundamentally, we must go back to the genesis of this problem. And the genesis of this problem is that BEE as a transformation policy was set up as a stitch-up between big business and political entrepreneurs within the ANC. It's no doubt that 23 years later, after its implementation, we find ourselves in a position where people in senior political positions had benefited at the feeding trough of BEE, while the vast majority of South Africans, particularly black South Africans, have been locked out of economic opportunity and have found themselves trapped in poverty. And fundamentally, what we need to do is we need to ensure that we remove that incentive for rent seeking out of empowerment policy. And we believe that the Economic Inclusion for All Bill does that by ensuring that we adhere to Section 217 of the Constitution, that we put in place the necessary verification mechanisms through our online portal, which we propose in our bill, and fundamentally making sure that we remove political interference out of the procurement process and focus on economic inclusion and value for money procurement.
So how then do you ensure that the fundamental reason for this particular move, this policy to address inequality and issues of redress is not lost. And in fact, we do see mostly of those who are previously disadvantaged actually getting more of the assistance here, because those are individuals who would not be on an equal footing with those who were benefiting from before.
I think first and foremost, as a party, we are firmly committed to redress. We understand the painful history of our past and the ongoing legacy that our past has placed on the vast majority of South Africans who are black. And fundamentally, our approach differs in the following: is that there are cadres who have been re-enriched time and time again because of their political connections. And what we're saying is, let's take race out of the equation and focus on poverty as a proxy for disadvantage. And if a company is going to do business with the state, there must be a demonstrable contribution towards either human development, economic empowerment, inclusive communities and governments, as well as environmental sustainability and the impacts and the projects that they have within communities. So it's not simply a case of just getting value for money in our procurement, but we make sure that businesses who operate in communities give back to communities, and ultimately those communities are able to benefit from empowerment policies rather than politicians who find themselves in positions of influence.
Matt, pardon me for coming in there, because that's the nub of it, right? The giving back. It looks different for everyone. So what does this human development look like at a practical level when you think of the communities that are living in squalor?
Sure. So I think just to take it one step back, and I think an important statistic to look at is the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate for Black South Africans stands at 36%, right? That far exceeds the national average for unemployment, which stands at roughly 32%. This means that despite 23 years of empowerment policy under the ANC-led administration, that has not made a tangible difference in the employment prospects of Black South Africans. Furthermore, when we go to poverty, we looked at almost 30 million Black South Africans find themselves trapped in poverty. And this is because of the ongoing system of BE. In contrast, the DA's proposal looks at focusing on key issues such as integrating small businesses into supply chains, investment into infrastructure in communities, making sure that we invest in renewable energy projects and investments, focusing on early childhood development, feeding schemes, as well as legal aid centres. And there are in excess of 50 different measures that we propose across all 5 of the areas to make sure that we make a tangible developmental impact in communities and we ensure that no one is left out of empowerment.
So you do have those who say that, in fact, the country hasn't had a conversation enough about what necessitated BE in the first place, with others saying that while some have, amassed obscene kinds of wealth, there is, of course, a concern that why not sanction directly those who have received who has amassed this kind of wealth, as opposed to a widespread condemnation of what some have described as a progressive policy. How do you contend with the view of some of those who continue to argue this?
Well, let's go back to the genesis of this policy in itself. This policy was cooked up between big business at the time as well as political entrepreneurs within the ANC. And the whole idea was that they would retain the status quo and lock people out of opportunity so they could continue business as usual. And those who wanted to be a part of the transition were allowed to enrich themselves at the expense of the poor. So fundamentally, I think the premise of the policy itself is harmful because it has never been committed towards genuine inclusivity or empowerment for all South Africans. And therefore, I would contend that the DA's alternative is one that prioritizes people who need the opportunities in order to be able to climb up the social mobility ladder. And we don't believe that the BEE policy of the ANC allows for that to happen, whether it's intensified, whether there's further investment that is made into that policy, or even if there are individuals who are sanctioned for their participation in it. The whole system is designed as an exclusionary system to lock people out of opportunity and ensure that cadres continue to line their pockets.
This is no doubt going to put you at loggerheads with your GNU partner, and that is the ANC. And I wonder, once again, we're finding ourselves here with both parties not agreeing on some of these matters. How does this installment now play out?
Well, I think most importantly is we must recognize that we are in coalition government with the ANC, but that does not mean that we need to agree with the ANC at all times. We have our own views, our own policies, and ultimately we are in the GNU to generate economic growth and to create jobs. And if we feel that the policies that are being implemented by the government of the day are not contributing towards economic growth and jobs, then it is within our remit to ensure that we influence those policies and try to change those policies. So what we are doing is we're introducing this legislation into Parliament. We are going to be soliciting the support of other parties, and we are going to be applying public pressure on the ANC to get behind our bill and focus on a genuine empowerment alternative rather than the narrow-based trickle-down redress which BEE has offered. And fundamentally, if we look at the Yes.
Pardon me, Matt. You say policies implemented by the government of the day. The DA is in government, though.
Yes, of course, but we are not in control of the DTIC that implements BEE policy.
It doesn't matter because, I suppose, to a South African, for example, I'll make you an example. When people see us, they see us representing the SABC. They don't say you are an SABC news channel, another one is on SABC 1, and all of that. The DA is in government. And when people speak about government, they speak about the government of national unity with all of these parties. So if you are saying that policies that are implemented by the government of the day, are you saying you have no confidence in the government of which you are part of?
Well, we certainly have confidence in our ministers who are on their 6 portfolios and the work that they've done over the past year. But there seemed to be a lack of appetite when it comes to reforming key economic measures from the ANC side. And this is why we fought the ANC in the budget. This is why we continue to push for the speeding up of reforms for structural issues within our economy. And fundamentally, it's not up to us to sit there and allow ourselves to be co-opted by the ANC. We are an individual party of our own. The coalition is made up of 10 parties. And it's important that we put forward voters' interests on a continuous basis. And if the ANC doesn't like that, then that's just too bad for them. But fundamentally, we are going to make sure that we put our policy positions front and center and do our best in portfolios in which we are not in control to try and influence and change policy for the betterment of South Africans.
So if you can't influence them, what happens?
Well, we're going to do our best to influence them. We would have to see how this plays out over the coming months. This is still a long road. On Friday, the notice of intention was gazetted for this particular bill, and it will undergo a parliamentary process. And obviously, we keep open minds in our engagement with our GNU partners. But that does not mean that we will relent on our public campaign to ensure that we are able to fundamentally transform empowerment policy in a way that creates an inclusive economy for all.
Matt, appreciate your time this evening. Let's see how it plays out, as you say, a long road ahead. And of course, thank you so much for speaking to us, Matt Cuthbert there, the DA's head of policy.